So in this video I'm going to show you how to paint really easy yet really effective orc skin tones, how to paint 2 different types of leather effects, as well as how to paint well-worn armour. All just to take a model from this to this. Now this is a Black Orc from Bloodbowl, which is the spoof fantasy American football board game by Games Workshop. Now, my friend Ben has recently got me back into this, and painting these guys, I've found a few awesome tricks which I've just got to show you. Okay, so let's start off with the basic model, which I've built and prepped as normal. Now, credit where credit is due to the sculptors. There's not much tidying up to do on these models. To be honest with you, the biggest faff was filling in the slot on the base, but that was easy enough to do with some milliput. I've already primed this with a coat of grey Tamiya surface primer, and I've let that dry. So now let's play with some paint. Now the first trick I'm going to show you is using AK Interactive's World War II US Army Soldier Uniform colour set from their figure series. Now interestingly, I'm going to use this to paint some really easy yet really effective orc skin tones. Now these colours are formulated for historical scale figures, but they are going to work awesomely for this. Now I bought this set for a different project, and this video is not sponsored at all. So I have put some links down in the description if you want to check out current prices for yourself. Also, by doing so, it also helps me to make more videos like this. And if you do enjoy content like this, then I hope you also consider hitting the subscribe button. So back to the paint. Now the first coat is AK Interactive's dark olive green. Now this is slightly thinned with water. This is then painted over all of the skin areas. Now you don't need to be too neat here, and it does help to get the paint right into the recesses. Now you might still end up with tiny areas of unpainted grey, but I'll show you how to tidy that up later. Yeah, that wasn't in the plan. Okay, no problem. Let's quickly drill and pin this with a micro drill bit, some wire and some glue. Not only is that a clean repair, but is now even stronger than it was before for transport to games. After finishing off painting the dark olive green and giving it a couple of minutes to dry, I break out the Citadel Evil Sun Scarlet and paint the eyes after switching to a much smaller brush. Now the thicker consistency of this paint means it holds a shape when I put it on, and it does not flow into those dark green recesses around the eyes. The next step is to create a glaze out of AK Interactive's US Olive base. Now place a little onto the palette and dilute it with water down to a glaze consistency, which is even thinner than you would use for a wash. Then when you paint it on, it should only just be visible. If it's too thin to the point that you can't actually see any colour there at all, then you can mix in a little more paint. But the key to this is to do very subtle layers. Now in this step we're painting the raised areas of the muscles in the arms and legs. Rather than painting it on in brush strokes, I'm almost stippling it on with tiny stabbing motion with a brush. Now this makes the effect less uniform, and as you can see here I'm using quite an old brush that has already lost its point. Now this also helps to keep the effect more random, but you just do need to keep an eye on where the brush is applying the paint. Now be really careful at this stage that you do not let the glaze run into the recesses. Now once that has dried, you can already see some colour variation in there already, and the colour jump between the 2 colours is not that stark. Now the next step is to put a second layer of the US Olive base glaze on, but this time only applying it to the raised upper areas of the model to help build volume to the shapes of the arms, legs and head. Now it's time to add some more life to those tones. Now I'm going to apply a glaze of AK Interactive Red Brown. This is once more diluted to a glaze and stippled onto the raised areas where we have painted so far. Now less is more with this, so do not go overboard with it. However, using some on and painting the inside of the ears gives a really nice effect. So to punch the highlights a bit higher, I next grabbed AK Interactive's Canvas Tone. Then while the red brown is still wet, I dilute the canvas tone down to a glaze and stipple this over the smallest areas, the tiniest parts, over the raised surfaces as a highlight. Now when this is dry, it will look something like this. And so far, remember, we've painted this really nice green skin tone using nothing but a World War II US Army uniform paint set. Now to finish the face, I mix up a little Vallejo colour black into a wash and apply that around the undersides of the eyes, in the recesses around that evil sun scarlet that we used earlier. Now this makes the red pop that little bit more. Now when you have two objects that are directly next to each other, you get what's called a contact shadow. So to create this, I use that black wash and just carefully run it along all the edges where the armour or the clothing or whatever is in direct contact with the skin. Now I do still have two different types of leather effect to show you. But first, for the armour, I'm going to start with Vallejo Model Air's Deep Sky. Now this is a very thin paint, so it's great for building up layers, as you will see later. Next, and just for a giggle, I used Vallejo Model Colour Orange Brown and a very fine brush to add a highlight to those red eyes. Next, I'm going to use Brain Splatter Beige from Eye Painter, and I'm going to use that to base coat the tusks on the mask and on the shoulder pauldron. And then for the red straps, I first base coated them with AK Interactive's Red Brown, and then a coat of Vallejo Model Air Fire Red. Now I did promise to show you two different styles of painting leather effects. Well, all the colours for both effects I'm going to show you come in the Vallejo's wood and leather paint set. Now first I'm going to show you a way to create a dark brown leather, which I'm going to use on the Orc's trousers. Now this starts with 2 to 3 thin coats of Vallejo chocolate brown over the primer until you have a solid colour. Next, the first highlight is created by using flat earth and diluting that down to a glaze, like we did with the green, and stippling that over the whole surface in a random way, not letting it pool too much. Now this helps us start building up the volumes and adds a bit of variety into the surface. Next is the brighter dark sand, which can feel a bit scary as it is such a colour shift to what you started with. And also you're not diluting this one down. Maybe a tiny bit of water to help with flow, but that's pretty much it. Now by applying this to the edges and in the forms of little lines and stipples, this starts to create texture to the surface of the leather. But try and avoid big chunks of colour here, because it just doesn't look right. Next, create a wash with Vallejo smoke and cover the whole surface. This acts as a filter for that bright dark sand colour, and it unifies it with the other colours as well. Finally, a few very fine brushstrokes of Vallejo black to create cuts and wear in the leather. Now this does work well if you line these brushstrokes with the ones in dark sand. Then after thinning the black with water, about 50-50, it is then used for the recesses in the leather and also to create that contact shadow where appropriate. Now the second leather effect I want to show you is the one where I want to make a much more reddish brown leather for the leather of the gauntlets. Over the primer I start with a base coat of a mix of roughly 70% wood grain and roughly 30% orange brown. They can do repeated coats until you have a solid colour. But as these gauntlets already have so many folds in the leather, I actually quite like that initial effect, so I'm going to work with that. Now the first highlight colour is orange brown. Normally I would thin this to a glaze and make that random colour shifts, like we did before. But as we already kind of have this in this scenario with the folds in the leather, I'm just going to go over the raised areas to add some more initial highlights and enhance the volumes. The brightest highlight is using the dark sand again and applying that to the edges and ridges in small lines and stipples to add texture. This is still quite a large colour jump, so this is brought down and unified using a wash of Vallejo wood grain. Once that is dried, then create a black wash made with 50% Vallejo black and 50% water and applying that to the deepest and darkest recesses and contact shadows. So, two different styles of leather. I'm actually quite pleased with how they came out. Right, I am liking this so far, but this armour looks more like an Imperial Noble rather than a Black Orc. So let's add some Orky details as well as some Bloodbowl batter damage. Orky checks are really easy to do by using a grey and dividing the ridge of this pauldron into even sections with a fine brush. Next, simply sketch in a horizontal line to create the checker pattern. If you're not confident with this, you can thin this almost to a wash to sketch some guidance lines in until you're happy with their placement. then go over those guidelines with a stronger colour to build up the line. Then use little sketchy brushstrokes in the same direction to fill in alternate sections. This gives a really nice rough effect, which is perfect for orcs. Now, adding scratches where some of the paint has been taken away is really easy by going back to the original dark sky blue and very lightly stippling it over the grey to show where the grey paint has been scratched away. But in high wear or high impact areas, this could be scraped away down to the bare metal. So using Vallejo steel and an oil brush, which has started to really badly split, I add little scratches in high impact areas like the front of the shoulder and on the edges of the plates. Now you can add another layer to this by going over again with a lighter shade of the top colour. Now in this case, a light blue. This kind of replicates that those scrapes that have not gone all the way through the paint. Looking at it, it looks a bit overdone now. That chip paint is actually making the model more difficult to read and understanding what is going on. Now to be fair, I do need to use very bright lights to film, so it might just be the reflective steel paint being distracting in the bright lights. Either way, I want to take that down a little bit while still maintaining the damaged effect. Also, I need to add a light wear effect to the face mask as well. So I use a black glaze to take the shine down a little bit before adding scratches of the light blue paint over much of that silver chipping using a very split brush to make the scratches finer and more random. Then a wash of that deep sky blue to finish it off. This was a great project to try out some new techniques. If you saw something new, what was your favourite? Now, one thing I'm growing to like about these Bloodbowl models is that with a relatively small number of models needed for a Bloodbowl team, you can really push your limits and try things out while still keeping the look of the team cohesive. Finally, after letting it all dry, then with a simple yet effective basing scheme, then 2 to 3 coats of Humbrol matte enamel varnish to protect it, this Black Orc is ready for the gridiron. Thank you to everybody who's supporting me on Patreon, and if this is not your first time with us, then I hope you will consider subscribing for more great content like this. And if that's the case, then you might like the video that's about to appear right here. Likewise, if you enjoyed this or learned something new, then please hit the like button, and I will see you on the next project.